Who invited you up here? The words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. Candace Holloway didn't raise her voice. Her clipboard did the talking. The way she clutched it like a warrant, chin slightly raised, eyes fixed without blinking, it said more than volume ever could. The rooftop lounge on the 33rd floor of Belridge Heights was made to hush the city. Champagne flutes shimmered in sunset light. Lounge chairs caught golden reflections off the infinity pool. Residents whispered over charcuterie and rooftop jazz. And alone, near the far edge, sat a man with no wine, no phone, just a sweating glass of iced tea and a slim folder balanced on his knee. He wore a faded gray polo, dark chinos, no logos, no Rolex, but he sat straight, spine aligned, and eyes unwavering as if carved into the stone he overlooked. Candace stood just a few feet from him, yet aimed her words toward others. Security's on the way. This area isn't open to visitors. Andre Milton didn't move. He turned a page. Not up, not down. Just calmly, precisely like someone used to letting others fill the silence first. A voice crackled through the security radio. Copy. Approaching north stairwell, Jared Wolf, head of security, appeared moments later, tall, built, uniform, crisp. But his steps carried hesitation. Candace met him halfway, handing over a plastic ID card. Ask him to show his. If he refuses, escort him out. Jared nodded once, then walked forward, clearing his throat as he neared Andre. Excuse me, sir, do you have your resident pass? Andre looked up at him. Calm. Steady, what the kidney? No defiance, just observation. He nodded faintly and reached into his side bag. But instead of a card, he pulled out a folder. He flipped it open, turned it upside down on the table between them. The heading on the top sheet read, Revised Leasing and Expansion Terms, Phase 3B. Candace cut in instantly. We didn't ask for documents, just the card. By now, other guests were watching. A woman holding her phone whispered, Is he staff, like maintenance or something? Jared sighed quietly. He didn't want this to escalate. But Candace was watching, and the lounge had eyes. Sir, I'm going to ask again. Who invited you up here? Andre looked at Jared again. Still no answer. He turned to the final page of the folder. Centered, bold, was a signature. Have you ever seen someone judge before they even said a word? If that moment hits you, right, I've seen it too below. Candace stepped forward, grabbed the folder off the table, and raised her voice just enough for the whole rooftop to hear. He refuses to comply. Someone get management. He's disrupting the rooftop experience for everyone. Candace froze for a beat when she saw the signature, then snapped the folder shut like it burned. This proves nothing, she barked, but her voice cracked just slightly at the edges. Jared shifted beside her, unsure if he should step in or step back. A small ripple moved through the lounge, the kind of subtle shift where people stop pretending they aren't watching. Wine glasses paused midair. Conversations dimmed into listening postures. One man near the bar whispered to his wife, He doesn't even have shoes on. She glanced down, then back up, wrinkled her nose. Definitely not a resident. A college-age guy by the pool adjusted his phone for better framing, whispering, I think we're catching another rooftop eviction. Love this building. Jared cleared his throat, tried again, more hesitant this time. Sir, we really just need your resident ID, that's all. It's policy. Andre didn't flinch. He reached into his side pocket slowly, deliberately, then stopped. Do you ask everyone up here for theirs, he asked, tone calm as before. Or just the ones who don't match the furniture? Jared opened his mouth, but nothing came out. The comment wasn't angry. It was worse, it was honest. Candace stepped forward again, lips pressed into a line. Look, this isn't about you, she said, choosing the last word like it had edges. It's about access. This lounge is for registered tower residents, and you clearly are not. Her voice carried over the wind like glass against stone. Behind her, a mother pulled her child gently back from the pool. Another couple edged toward the door. Jared tapped his radio. Checking unit registry now, he mumbled. He scrolled, thumb jittery against the screen. No record for Milton. Not in tower units. Could be a guest from Level C. Level C, a voice scoffed behind him. It was Ethan Prescott, stepping out from the elevator in tailored blue and visible authority. That's service housing. Staff, short-term renters, business interns. He adjusted his watch as if to underline the point. I know every permanent resident here. I've never seen this man before in my life. He turned to Andre directly. So how exactly did you get access to this level? Andre's gaze didn't move. But in his silence, something shifted, like he was watching a stage he'd already performed on. His fingers rested on the folder still lying on the table, not clutching it, just anchoring it. Ethan turned to the crowd with performative composure. If he's a resident, it'll be in the system. Let's give it 60 seconds. We'll all see the truth. There was something unnerving about how quickly the rooftop crowd slipped into roles, how natural it was for people to align behind certainty even before facts arrived. A woman in workout gear leaned over her wine spritzer and muttered, I think I've seen him before, near the service entrance. Another nodded without looking up from her phone. Maybe one of the remote contractors they let in during renovation. The word let in landed heavier than intended. Ethan stood tall in front of the fire pit, hands folded like a courtroom closer. Look, this is about maintaining standards. Privacy, security. If we start letting anyone wander up, this place loses what makes it exclusive. He turned toward Andre. And I'm sure you understand the importance of boundaries. Andre didn't blink. He watched Ethan like someone watching a mirror polish itself, detached, practiced, bored. Jared's radio chirped. Still no entry for that name in any of the tower databases. He said, voice more confident now. Not on the penthouse ledger. Not in co-tenancy. He paused. Might be in the service side listings. That's what I said, Ethan added, voice rising just enough for everyone to hear. This is exactly why we can't relax enforcement. One exception turns into exposure. He gestured toward a younger guest filming on his phone. See, now it's public. We look careless. In the corner, two girls whispering by the pool exchanged glances. One of them finally spoke up, not loudly, but enough. He's not doing anything. He's just sitting. The other shushed her, tugging her wrist. Don't. You don't know how these things work. Candace, emboldened by Ethan's presence, stepped beside Jared. Sir, final request. If you don't provide verification, we will have to remove you. And file it with management. Her voice had flattened now. Cold, procedural. The kind of voice that came right before policy. Andre's eyes moved slowly once around the rooftop, taking in every guest who'd heard, who'd watched, who'd said nothing. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had paid for the view. Entrepreneur is mastermind. Now they wanted to evict him from it. But he didn't say that. He only asked one thing. What's the system called that you're checking me against? Jared hesitated. Iftarin Tornado Building link. Updated hourly. Andre nodded once. Good. That'll help. At that exact moment, a younger man in a black suit stepped out from the stairwell. He held a phone in one hand, and in the other a set of keys that only building executives carried. Andre didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice or lift a hand. He simply reached for his phone and tapped the screen. The action was so quiet, so measured, it unsettled more than if he had shouted. No one could see what he was looking at, but the act itself carried weight. Not defensive. Calculated. Jared leaned toward Candace, voice low but tight. If he posts this and spins it as racial, we're all done. It'll go viral before management even calls back. Candace narrowed her eyes. Then get ahead of it. Before this becomes a PR fire. She pulled out her own phone and stepped away toward the elevator glass wall, dialing fast. Her voice lowered, but her pacing betrayed her urgency. Yes, this is Holloway. We have a guest refusing to verify residency on rooftop access. Need immediate direction, yes, on camera. Meanwhile, Ethan tried to rally the crowd. Let's not let this distract us from the original point, he declared. Unauthorized access is still unauthorized, regardless of optics. But a few heads began to tilt. One resident murmured, he's still just sitting there. Another older man turned toward Ethan. Remind me, did we ever have to show IDs before coming up here? Andre continued scrolling on his screen. His expression didn't change. But one detail flickered. The top bar on his screen wasn't on a social app. It was a clock. He was just checking the time. And that more than anything made the others tense. Why check the time unless you knew something was about to happen? Behind him, someone pressed the rooftop call button again. The door pinged. A soft whoosh. The elevator opened slowly, and a man in a sleek black suit stepped out, phone to his ear, carrying a ring of brass keys that caught the sun like a flare. His name badge read Colin Reyes, Facilities Director. He didn't speak right away. He scanned the rooftop, then walked straight toward Andre, not Candace, not Ethan, not security. Andre looked up, nodded once. Calm, like he'd been waiting. Colin ended his call mid-sentence, leaned in, and said something only Andre could hear. The smile that followed wasn't polite, it was confirmation. Ethan Prescott stepped closer now, as if the presence of a building officer somehow reignited his relevance. He adjusted the cuffs of his blazer, smoothed the lapels, and offered the kind of practiced smile that usually came with campaign buttons or charity auctions. For those who don't know me, he began, his voice gliding across the rooftop like a press release. I've lived in Belridge for 9 years. Chair of the Residential Standards Board, founder of the Rooftop Wine Initiative, and, well, let's just say I make it a point to know every full-time resident in this tower. He let the sentence hang, heavy with implication. He turned to Andre, smile sharpened now. Where do you work, sir? Andre blinked once. Not slowly, not quickly, just enough to register the question. I live here, he replied, voice even. But Ethan tilted his head, stepping slightly forward as if proximity could press an advantage. That wasn't my question. The air turned denser, not hot but tense. The kind of shift where even those who agreed with Ethan instinctively took half a step back, unsure what exactly he was trying to prove. Candace folded her arms tighter. Jared checked the lock screen on his radio again, suddenly less sure of what to transmit. Colin, the facilities director, said nothing. He simply stood behind Andre now, not in support, not in opposition, just quietly present, like someone briefed but waiting. Ethan raised his voice just enough to reclaim control. Let's not waste anyone's time. If this gentleman is who he claims to be, it'll be in the database. He looked toward Jared, then at the elevator camera directly above them. Call Security HQ. Give them the name. If we don't get a hit in 2 minutes, we've got our answer. He smiled again, but this time it didn't reach his eyes. Andre didn't move, but the brass keys in Colin's hands shifted, one slid out, almost like it knew what was coming next. And somewhere behind them, the rooftop security feed began streaming live to an office no one in the crowd knew existed. 6 months earlier, the walls of the Belridge Conference Suite had been lined with framed renderings of luxury. Polished marble, nashui yerme brush, rooftop fire pits, community green spaces with invisible cameras and very visible fountains. It was a future designed to impress investors and discourage uninvited curiosity. Andre had taken the last seat at the far end of the table, quiet, unnoticed. No one had asked for his name. No one had offered water. His company logo was not on the printed agenda. Ethan Prescott had walked in 10 minutes late, but spoke like he'd been running the show from the beginning. We need real partners for this expansion, he'd said, flipping through proposals without looking at the presenters. Belridge deserves vetted institutions, brands that elevate our long-term vision. One folder was pushed forward, simple design, no frills. This one, he said, tapping it twice without opening. Not a match. Too small. Doesn't align with our values. Andre hadn't said a word. He'd watched as his firm's proposal, months of site surveys, projections, inclusive housing options, was dismissed in 12 seconds. He'd folded his hands beneath the table, the same way he always did when people forgot he was in the room. Not out of fear, out of discipline. He knew that power, misused, eventually circled back. Now, standing on the rooftop, Andre's thumb brushed the edge of that same folder, updated, rebranded, but still his. It held a different logo now. One the board had accepted in the end, not realizing who had resubmitted it from behind a holding company shell. Across from him, Ethan checked his watch again. Jared fidgeted. Candace was on her third call, voice strained but still trying to sound like she was handling it. No one noticed Andre's silence wasn't passive. It was loaded. Just before anyone could speak, Andre slowly opened the folder, not to the front, but somewhere in the middle, like he already knew which page they'd need. The chill in the rooftop air reminded him of something colder, far below all this polish and altitude. A year ago, he'd come to Belridge not in a suit, not as a planner, but to walk the guts of the place. Construction level, wiring access, mechanical floors no brochure ever mentioned. He wore steel-toed boots and carried a clipboard, no different from the dozens of contractors doing walkthroughs that month. But one afternoon, passing through the service corridor to catch an elevator, he'd taken a wrong turn and ended up in the main lobby. He never made it past the carpet. A concierge, young and overly eager, stepped in front of him before he could cross the marble. "Sir," he said, eyes darting to Andre's boots, to the faded name tag on his jacket. "Service staff aren't permitted in this area during guest hours." Andre raised a brow. "I'm not putting my tongue." But it didn't matter. The radio had already crackled. Security had already been called. And 15 minutes later, he was sitting in a maintenance office next to a water heater, waiting for a manager who never came. "You're too calm," the concierge had muttered under his breath, almost confused by Andre's stillness. "Most people try to explain themselves. You're too calm for someone who's not supposed to be here." That sentence never left him. Not because it was cruel, but because it was sincere, as if Andre's composure didn't compute without status, as if presence required permission. Now, on the rooftop, Andre touched the inner sleeve of the folder and slid out a single page. A page not labeled proposal or overview, but something quieter, more final. A signed lease amendment, his amendment, issued under a name no one in this circle recognized, but legally binding, ironclad, effective. He folded it back into the folder and pulled out a small card. "Matte to finish. Wani Hawaii nato. Gold edge, a washed short dertum. No logo." But every resident in the tower had one. He used it not to make a statement, but to mark a page. If you've ever stayed silent just to see what people reveal when they think no one's watching, this story is for you. Subscribe, because here silence speaks louder than noise. As he set the folder down, face closed again, Candace turned and finally noticed what had been in his hand all along. Her face stiffened. Ethan leaned forward. "What is that?" Andre didn't answer. He just slid the folder 2 inches forward toward the edge of the table. Toward the fall, one shot. Candace took a single step forward and slapped a folder onto the edge of the bar table with a crisp, rehearsed motion. The plastic snap echoed, sharp as a gavel. "Rooftop code violation form 27C, she announced, projecting for the audience now fully tuned in. "Failure to present valid resident identification when prompted. Grounds for temporary suspension of shared amenity, access up to 60 days. Jared stood beside her, posture stiff, eyes locked on the form like it might disappear if he looked away. He tapped on his security tablet, screen reflecting back a digital version of the same citation. "Form submitted. Violation report entered. Copy has been sent to building management." Ethan nodded with restrained satisfaction. "And with that, we've followed protocol," he said calmly, folding his arms. "There will be a formal review, but for now, his rooftop access is revoked pending verification." He turned to Andre, tone almost condescendingly polite. "You're welcome to return to your unit, assuming, of course, you actually live in one." The words landed like a public verdict, and the crowd responded the way crowds often do, not with outrage, but with disengagement. A woman by the pool returned to her book. A man in golf attire whispered, "C should have just shown the damn card." Andre still hadn't spoken. He remained seated, back straight, eyes unshaken, one hand on the folder, the other lightly resting on his knee. His breathing was steady. No defense. No protest. Just stillness. Candace closed the folder with a final click. "If you choose not to leave voluntarily," she added, "security will escort you. This is a private facility. This rooftop represents a certain standard." Her voice caught just for a second on that last word. Standard. It echoed in Andre's ears longer than it should have. Not because of what it meant, but because of how many times he'd heard it used to explain what someone wasn't. As she turned to signal Jared, Andre finally moved but not to argue. Just to pick up something small from the ground. Something they hadn't seen fall. Andre rose slowly, not with urgency, not in defiance, but the way someone stands when they've learned that moving too quickly only invites more suspicion. His spine straightened, but his shoulders didn't rise. There was no puffing of the chest, no need to reclaim space, only the quiet rhythm of someone choosing restraint. Even when restraint has cost them before. He didn't say a word. He reached down and picked up a small black card from the floor, smooth and gleaming at the edge. From far away, it looked like nothing, just another object. But the way his fingers brushed it, how carefully he tucked it into the folder, made it feel like something far heavier. Something that had meaning only to those who knew what they were looking at. He dropped something. "Is that ID?" a woman by the glass wall whispered, not curious, but loaded. Another guest, younger, already filming, tilted his phone up to catch Andre's profile. Still no response. "He's not even defending himself," he muttered, before going live. "Belridge rooftop violation. You're seeing it happen." In less than a minute, the live stream picked up over 70 viewers, most of them strangers, all of them ready to decide. Andre heard the clicks. He heard the whispering, but he stayed still. Eyes resting just past the edge of the infinity pool where the sky touched steel and glass. He wasn't ignoring them. He just wasn't prioritizing them. The girl behind the camera continued, voice louder now, shaped for online outrage. "He's just standing there. Nothing to say. Honestly, that tells you everything, right?" Andre glanced over, just once. Not to glare, not to confront, just a glance. And in that split second, his eyes said what words wouldn't. "You think silence means surrender. But it only means I've been here before." Ethan stepped closer to the crowd, tone soft like a trusted authority figure. "This isn't personal," he said smoothly. "We're simply following procedure. If we start bending rules based on how someone reacts, we lose what makes this community safe." Structured. Candace checked her phone again, fidgeting now, waiting for that final confirmation that never seemed to come. Jared stayed still, but something in his shoulders had shifted. His jaw wasn't clenched anymore. He looked tired. Andre walked a few paces, placed the card and folder neatly on the table beside him, then turned away from them all. The skyline bathed him in gold, but the rooftop air was thin. People watched his back like they were waiting for it to break. And still, he said nothing. From behind the secure glass, a buzz rang out. Then a voice, not panicked but sharp. "Reyes to Rooftop. We just got a code red from leasing office. Something's wrong." The buzz from the security panel wasn't loud, but it broke the air like a dropped glass. Every head turned. Even Candace paused mid-sentence, her phone still lit in her hand. A voice crackled through the rooftop speakers, not the usual calm front desk tone, but something clipped. Urgent. "Facilities to Rooftop. We've got a code red from leasing. Requesting confirmation." Jared blinked. "Code red? That doesn't even apply to resident violations," he muttered, scrolling his radio frequency panel. "That's usually for internal misidentification or legal complications." Candace's fingers tightened around her phone. "That has nothing to do with this," she snapped quickly, too quickly. "They're probably responding to something downstairs." But Jared had already received another message. The vibration hit his wrist hard enough to startle him. He looked down at the screen, paused, then paled. "We need to verify something," he said, almost to himself. Then louder, privately. "Now in Winternapo." Candace turned sharply. No, if this is a situation, we handle it here. In the open, one. Transparency is everything." Her voice had climbed half an octave, trying to sound firm but landing closer to brittle. Jared didn't argue. But he didn't move either. From the elevator lobby, Colin Reyes reappeared. This time not alone. A second man, early 40s, in a charcoal vest and name badge clipped low, followed close behind. He looked like someone who didn't usually come upstairs, someone pulled into a mess reluctantly. In his hand, a manila folder sealed with a red sticker. They didn't approach Andre. They walked toward Jared. Ethan watched this unfold with the rising anxiety of someone used to being the final voice in the room until now. "Excuse me," he said, stepping forward. "What exactly is this about?" Colin didn't look at him. He handed the folder to the man beside him, who opened it with a quiet snap and showed Jared something inside. Jared stared silent for several seconds. Then, without a word, he turned to Andre and nodded. It wasn't apology. It wasn't surrender. It was the first sign that the system had realized they'd been looking in the wrong direction all along. Behind them, the security camera above the elevator tilted automatically toward the table where Andre's folder still sat unopened. Jared didn't say a word. He stepped aside. Colin Reyes took his place at the edge of the rooftop lounge, cleared his throat softly, just enough for attention to shift without needing to call for it. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his tone calm but reverent, like someone speaking in a museum next to something priceless. "We'd like to formally acknowledge Mr. Andre Milton, strategic legal representative and principal investment partner for Northbridge Holdings." There was a pause, a ripple, and then silence that felt like it had mass. Colin continued, "Northbridge is the firm overseeing Phase 3 development, which includes this rooftop redesign, elevator modernization, and all public amenity restructuring currently underway in Belridge Heights." Ethan took half a step back. Candace blinked, her mouth slightly open, too stunned to speak, too proud to admit she didn't understand what just happened. Jared looked away. Andre stood still, one hand resting on the folder like it was always meant to be there. His face didn't shift. Not smug, not angry, not triumphant. Just steady. Like this was always going to happen, just not on their schedule. Behind him, the wind picked up slightly. The flag on the far parapet fluttered. The sound of traffic below, once distant, now felt loud, like the real world was roaring back into a rooftop that had just seen its own story implode. Colin stepped back respectfully. The man in the vest handed Andre the sealed folder, no longer red-stickered. "Now open neat shuru the shidrin," verified. "Visible? There you walk in. Ethan finally managed to form a sentence. You're behind Northbridge." Andre didn't look at him. He simply placed the open folder back on the table, rotated it gently so the nameplate faced forward, and said only this: "I never needed to explain that, but you needed to assume I didn't belong. That part was yours." Across the rooftop, someone's phone pinged. Then another. And another. Notifications lit up like a chain reaction. Belridge livestream now trending. The first ping came from a teenager near the pool. He glanced at his screen, confused, then tapped twice and froze. "Wait," what he whispered. Another phone buzzed. Then another. The alerts came fast like fireflies under a broken lid. Belridge Heights Rooftop Livestream 900 watching. Breaking confrontation over false violation. Man accused of trespassing turns out to be who? Someone gasped, not from injury, but recognition. Across the rooftop, heads bowed over screens, swiping, tapping, then turning toward Andre with a new kind of gaze. Not suspicion this time, but stunned curiosity. Candace glanced down at her own phone. Her eyes widened as the footage loaded, her own voice echoing back, her hand pointing, her words "he refuses to comply" playing with brutal clarity. The footage wasn't from anyone's phone. It was from the mounted corner security camera, high, fixed, invisible to the casual eye. The stream had been live for over 20 minutes, and it had been embedded directly on the Belridge community homepage. Jared's voice caught in his throat. "That feed, it's supposed to be private. Internal only. Level 4 clearance." Ethan's face turned the color of wet concrete. He reached for his phone, then pulled back like it might burn him. "Who authorized that stream?" he asked, but no one answered. Because they all knew the answer. Andre didn't move. He didn't need to. The silence around him did the work. That footage hadn't just exposed a misunderstanding, it had laid bare every tone, every glance, every time someone talked around him instead of to him. Candace staggered back a step. Not from fear, from shame. The sound of her voice on the recording clipped, certain, superior, played back now like a mask melting under heat. She looked at Andre, not with confrontation anymore, but disbelief. At herself. Inside his pocket, Ethan's phone began to ring. The screen read Prescott Holdings, legal counsel. And he knew, without even answering, that the cost of that live stream had just begun. Ethan stared at the caller ID like it had betrayed him. Prescott Holdings, legal counsel. His fingers hovered, then tapped to answer, but didn't bring the phone to his ear right away. He already knew the tone he'd hear. When he finally spoke, his voice had dropped its polish. Yeah, I'm aware. Yes, I've seen it. No, I didn't authorize the stream. His eyes flicked toward Andre, then away again. There what effective immediately. A pause. His face went pale, then stiff. Understood. He ended the call with the kind of stillness that says everything just fell apart. 3 of his key development contracts, security oversight, facilities consulting, and event partnerships terminated within minutes of the footage going public. One was with a client he'd known for 12 years. He didn't even look up. Across the rooftop, Candace was still scrolling first through comments, then through internal group chats. Messages popped like warning flares. Candace, we're removing you from the amenities committee effective tonight. Your name came up in the HOA audit review. You may want to prepare a statement. This doesn't look good. The word resignation appeared 3 times in 10 minutes. Her hands trembled. She typed something, paused, deleted it. She started to walk toward Andre, but then stopped halfway, suddenly aware that nothing she could say would be heard as genuine. Not anymore. Maybe not ever again. Jared, meanwhile, had stepped aside, talking quietly into his headset. His voice cracked mid-sentence. I was following protocol. He didn't show ID, no. I didn't know his role. I thought... The voice on the other end must have said everything he feared. Jared's eyes closed. His lips didn't move. He stood there like a man waiting for a verdict already read. No one asked Andre to speak. No one dared. Because by now, it was clear he'd spoken louder through silence than any of them had with words. If this moment made you hold your breath, maybe it's because you've seen power shift like this before. Subscribe to follow stories where silence speaks, and the truth doesn't wait for permission. Andre finally turned to face them, not with anger, not with triumph, just with a question they hadn't earned an answer to. And then he spoke. Andre stood still for a long second. Not the kind of pause that buys time, but the kind that returns it. He looked at the people surrounding him not as accusers, not as villains, just as people who'd shown exactly who they were when they thought no one important was watching. His voice, when it came, didn't need to rise. It was steady, plain, but each word carried a weight the rooftop had never held before. I was quiet, he said, because I wanted to see who you really are, without the masks. No one moved. He let the silence linger not to punish, but to expose what was already unraveling. People show you a version of themselves when they think you're beneath them, he continued, eyes now locked with Ethan's, and another when they think you're above them. But the version that matters is how they treat you when they think you're no one. Candace looked away. Not quickly, slowly, like someone backing out of their own reflection. Ethan tried to speak, but the words never left his throat. They withered between thought and voice, collapsing under the weight of being seen. Jared, hands still clasped behind him, nodded once, barely visible, but it was all the apology he had left. Andre turned back to the table, picked up the folder, and closed it gently. The sound of the clasp echoed far louder than anything Ethan had said that day. His gold-edged card lay beside it, untouched. He didn't take it. He left it there. For them to look at, for them to remember, for them to ask themselves why it had taken this long to see it. Somewhere near the glass railing, a resident whispered just loud enough for those closest to hear. I always wondered who paid for the elevator upgrades. And across the lounge, someone else muttered, yeah, I think we all just found out. Candace sat alone at the far end of the rooftop, eyes locked on her phone screen that no longer blinked with power, but with consequence. Her HOA group chat had exploded. Dozens of messages, one after the other. You need to resign. We can't defend what's on that video. People are saying this isn't the first time. She had started writing a post, something that sounded official, composed, carefully regretful. She deleted it before finishing the first sentence. Not because she didn't know what to say, but because nothing she wrote sounded like enough. Not after her voice had already told the whole city who she was. Live. By the time she left the rooftop, she wasn't escorted. No one asked her to leave, but no one stopped her either. And that silence felt heavier than any confrontation. Jared stood off to the side, his badge still clipped to his chest, though no one was listening to it anymore. He'd called his supervisor, then HR, then after a long pause, his mother. He tried to explain before she could speak, but the moment her voice came through, shaking and small, he didn't get a word in. I saw it on the 5 o'clock news. Your face, a ditto word, a worm. They said, security confrontation with possible racial profiling. Tinanawa. Mama, I didn't mean. They don't know that. All they saw was you. He stayed on the call long after she stopped speaking, just to hear her breathe. That night, the security office issued a statement Jared Wolf would be placed on indefinite leave pending an internal review. The words sounded clinical, but when he took off his badge and set it on the desk, he didn't feel like someone suspended. He felt dismissed, not by the system, by the story he'd allowed himself to believe that following protocol meant he couldn't be part of the harm. And just 2 floors below, in a room lined with blueprints and legacy contracts, Ethan Prescott stared at the glowing screen of an email titled, Immediate Contract Termination. Cause public integrity violation. Ethan hadn't moved for 10 minutes. The screen in front of him still glowed with the same subject line. Immediate contract termination. Cause public integrity violation. 3 lines of text. 1 sentence. No appeal. The message wasn't just from one client. It had been forwarded from 2 more, each adding a variation of the same closing. We can no longer be affiliated with the Belridge incident. He reread the word incident again. The word felt sanitized. Safe for him. As if the problem wasn't what he'd done, but how clearly it had been seen. He reached for the folder on his desk, the one with the rooftop redesign budgets. His planned Phase 4 speaking engagement, the scheduled community gala. He slid it into the trash bin without opening it. Across the courtyard, the fallout continued. A resident in her 70s, Mrs. Alvarez, known for defending old-school standards, had quietly submitted a motion to reevaluate the board leadership. She hadn't spoken to Andre. She didn't need to. Her signature on that form was enough. In the garden-level common area, a group of 20-somethings had already set up podcast mics by the coffee bar. They called it Why Silence Isn't Neutral. Within 48 hours, their teaser clip, When Power Meets Assumption, Someone Always Pays, would reach over 30,000 streams. And not just within Belridge. They didn't interview Andre. They didn't need to. His presence was the reason the mic turned on. At that exact moment, as if summoned by ripple effect, Andre's phone buzzed in his pocket. Just once. No ringtone. No urgency. He took it out quietly, still standing on the rooftop edge where the city met sky. The message read, Mr. Milton, the mayor's office would like to meet. We believe there's something bigger than this rooftop we should be talking about. He looked at the message, then looked out again at the skyline he helped design. And finally he smiled. Not because he'd won, but because the conversation had finally begun. And as he turned to leave, someone behind him whispered, he didn't just change the rooftop. He changed how we look at each other. It was the first time the rooftop had ever been that full. Not full like a party. Not loud. Just whole. The gala wasn't flashy. No banners. No big-name sponsors. But the sign-in table didn't separate residents by tower or level. And the guest list, if anyone had checked, would have shown names that never used to be printed together. Candace didn't come. Jared came briefly, without his badge. He stood near the corner for a few minutes, then left without speaking. But his name was still on the volunteer roster, filed under post-event cleanup. Andre didn't stand on a stage. He wasn't introduced. He didn't make a speech. In fact, no one pointed him out at all. But people knew. They nodded. Some made eye contact. Some didn't. But the air had shifted, not cleared. Not erased, but softened. Like the rooftop itself had remembered it was meant to be shared. Near the wine table, someone had arranged simple white flowers in tall glass vases. Not flashy, just elegant. And then, near the back, a small moment unfolded quietly, almost like the building was trying to whisper it, not announce it. Mrs. Alvarez, cane in one hand, a small plate in the other, walked slowly toward Andre's table. Weeks ago, she'd shaken her head at him from behind a glass door, said words like order and tradition. Tonight, she said nothing. She just placed a slice of her lemon cake in front of him, nodded once, and walked away. Andre didn't eat it, but he didn't move it either. Behind him, a group of younger residents passed out donation cards. The fund was going to a new rooftop community program, financial literacy for teens, open design workshops, inclusive leadership training. None of these programs existed a month ago. Now, they had a wait list. At the far end of the rooftop, tucked behind a pillar, a folded envelope sat on a chair. No name on the outside, just clean, heavy paper. But inside, Ethan's handwriting curved across the page. You didn't deserve what happened. I hope someday I can be someone who wouldn't have caused it. Andre found the envelope just before the event ended. Someone had placed it neatly on the back of the chair where he'd first been questioned, same position, same angle, like the rooftop remembered where it owed him something. He opened it slowly, not expecting much. But the handwriting struck him first, not typed, not dictated. Handwritten, shaky in places, probably rewritten more than once before being sent. You didn't deserve what happened. You didn't need to be tested to be seen. And yet, we made you prove everything. I hope someday I can be someone who wouldn't have caused it. Ethan. Andre folded the note once. Then again, he didn't tear it, didn't pocket it. The reef on her finger, he left it right there, under the wine glass. The chair beside it, the one facing the skyline, sat empty. Instead of answering the letter, he placed something else in its place, a hardcover book, worn at the corners, edges slightly faded from years of carrying. Building Without Walls. No subtitle. No author name printed, but on the first page, written in soft pencil, were 5 words. Power is not the loudest voice. He stood a moment longer, hands in pockets, letting the wind carry what it wanted. Some people looked his way. A few nodded again. No one interrupted. He walked down the stairwell instead of taking the elevator. The camera didn't follow. Later that night, someone posted a photo from the rooftop, the empty chair, the book, the skyline. The caption wasn't dramatic, just honest. He didn't leave a speech. He left something we might actually learn from. And as guests began to drift back inside, a little girl standing by the railing pulled on her mother's sleeve and asked, "Is he the owner now?" Her mother looked out at the empty chair, then smiled gently. "He always was. We just didn't see it." The rooftop was quiet now. Not empty, but quiet in the way places are when they've finally been heard. Andre stepped out alone, jacket draped over his forearm, folder in one hand, same table waiting for him like it hadn't moved since the first day. The wind was softer tonight. The lights from the skyline blinked without hurry, casting gold across the railing and shadows across his chair. He sat slowly. Same angle, same posture. He opened the folder again, not to prove anything. Not to defend, but to simply return to the page he had never finished. His fingers found the crease where the paper still held the slight imprint of a folded corner. He read, and for the first time since all of it began, he smiled without anyone watching. The camera didn't follow him. But the rooftop lights adjusted as if they remembered. In the distance, a child's laughter echoed faintly from another balcony. Somewhere below, a bell from a streetcar chimed once, then disappeared. Then, the voiceover came in, gentle and unrushed. They asked for proof. But the real proof was in their reaction when they thought I had none. This wasn't about access, or cards, or codes. It was about how quickly we decide who belongs and how rarely we question why. Andre closed the folder gently, not with finality, but like a chapter waiting for others to catch up. He left the folder on the table. Not for show, for whoever needed to read it next. As he stood, a breeze lifted the corner of the document again, just enough for the top line to show. Phase 4, Community Redesign, Shared Leadership Model. The rooftop lights dimmed slightly as he walked toward the stairs. But the chair he left behind stayed lit like the conversation wasn't over. Have you ever been judged based on how you looked? Not who you are. If this story resonates with you, drop it below. Your voice might be the one someone else needs to hear. Because sometimes it's not the loudest person who teaches the room something. It's the one who waited and let the room reveal itself. This is Unveiled Wealth, where silence speaks and every story leaves a mark.